So, this is how five global transitions are quietly deciding your income, your job, and your country's future. Sometimes not that quietly, but nobody in power is measuring those transitions properly. Or maybe they are, but they don't tell you about it. This episode is your shortcut to fixing that. So, welcome back to another episode of InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles. If you write EU proposals, if you lead research projects, if you launch your innovation in a market, or if you worry about where your career is going in this chaos, stay with me, because this might be the most useful minutes you spend this month. So here's the twist. We're not just talking about the economy in the abstract. We're talking about whether you are betting your time, your brain, your proposals on the right side of history. The economy is you, your life. So by the end of this episode, I hope you'll feel more secure to pick better research topics, to pick better calls to apply to, and to avoid wasting 3 years on a project that was doomed from the start. And yes, this episode is also built around my new book, Transition Science in the Economy, which was published last month, November. But this is not a book promo disguised as a podcast. This is the field manual version of the final chapter of the book. So first I'm going to give you the fast version of transition science. So in plain language, GDP growth doesn't tell you if your country, your institution, or your project is actually improving. So we need to go to the new economic compass I use in the book, the five big transitions: the green transition, the digital transition, the transition to a new globalization, transition to a war economy, and the housing crisis transition. The world, the economy is moving, but it's not moving up and down as the GDP somehow projects or suggests. The world is moving in these five directions, and the balance across them now matters more than just GDP growth. So if you're here because you want to win more funding, if you want your research to actually matter, or you simply don't want to wake up in 2030 and realize you bet your whole career in the wrong direction, this episode is for you. And you'll walk away with three things: a simple mental model for the five transitions, a way to use that model in your proposals and reports, and a clear sense of whether my book Transition Science in the Economy is the right economic compass for the next decade. If that sounds useful, let's dive in. This episode of InnovEU, the EU Project Chronicles, is brought to you by my new book, Transition Science in the Economy. In it, I use data from more than 180 countries and 150,000 observations, data points, to show how five global shifts, five global transitions, the digital, the green, the new globalization, the transition to a war economy, and the housing crisis transition, how these five transitions are collapsing the middle class and rewriting prosperity and power. So if you want a clear map of today's economy and economic chaos, search for Transition Science in the Economy on Amazon and get your copy. So let's get practical for a second. Most of the people listening to this show have the same silent fear. What if I spend the next 3-5 years on a topic, on a project, on a startup, and by the time I launch it, nobody cares? Funders move on, policies change, platforms collapse, some new war, some new regulation, some new AI model, and suddenly your cutting-edge work looks like a museum piece. This is annoying, but it's more than annoying. It's expensive. It costs you money, it costs you time, and it costs you reputation. So I want to give you a glimpse of the new economy that actually helps you choose better bets. I hope this glimpse will help you choose better bets for funding, for career impact, and for not getting crushed by AI and the platforms. So, first, we often say everything is changing so fast. And that is true. It's not very useful though. What's actually happening is the economy is being rewired along 5 big transitions all at the same time. The green transition with decarbonization, climate risks and energy systems, the digital transition with the almighty data, AI, connectivity, and the need to reskill the labor force, the transition to a new globalization from just in time to just in case, from cheap to resilient, the transition to a war economy with the security threats, the dual-use tech, the defense budgets, the critical infrastructure protection, and finally, the transition out of the housing crisis with all the issues about affordability, homelessness, and cities under pressure that makes you wonder if we're really transitioning out of it. So in every country, every company, every university is moving on these 5 tracks. Some are ahead on one and stuck on others. Some are ahead on digital and stuck on housing. Others are investing in green tech, but are very fragile on security and defense. So here's the idea. Prosperity now depends on how balanced and coordinated these 5 transitions are. Not just if your GDP is growing fast or slow. More than that, if you're great at one of these transitions and terrible at others, you're not safe, you're exposed. For you as a researcher, as an innovator, as an entrepreneur, that means if your work fits into several of these transitions at once, you may be in the right spot. If your work doesn't connect to any of them, you're betting against the direction of history. You're probably in the wrong place. Second point, from GDP to transition scorecard. Traditional economic theory gives you a very simple dashboard. You have GDP growth, you have unemployment, inflation, public debt. Okay, you have everything. Is that useful? Absolutely. Is that enough? No, not anymore. A country can have a 6% GDP growth, very high, and still be locked into fossil infrastructure, still be digital dependent on 2 foreign platforms, still be militarily vulnerable and completely broken on housing. On paper, that country, growing 6%, well, is doing very well. In reality, it's sitting on a minefield. So we need a different way of reading the world. In my work on transitions, I use something I call a transition scorecard. It takes those big 5 transitions and turns them into scores from 0 to 10. So then we combine them into a composite score that tells you, well, how balanced the country is, where the biggest risks are, where the gaps are, and so where the funding and the innovation opportunities will go to. You don't need to build the index yourself, you just need the mindset. So stop asking, is this country growing? And start asking, how is this country transitioning? Because funding is moving there anyway. I mean, with the Green Deal missions, the Digital Europe and AI calls, the defense and dual-use innovation, the urban resilience and affordable housing, all of that is literally structured around these 5 transitions. So if your proposal echoes that logic, you will look strategic. If it doesn't, you will look out of sync. Even if your methodology is brilliant and your state-of-the-art piece is fantastic, you will look out of sync. Okay, third point. Why old economics don't fit anymore? So let's go back to the digital transition. And then let's layer AI and platform capitalism on top of this. Classic economic theory was built on three comfortable assumptions. Most value comes from human labor, and capital markets are reasonably competitive. Buyers and sellers have similar information. Now let's look at the current economy, and all three of those are broken. First, let's look at labor. AI is now coding, writing, diagnosing, optimizing, generating content. Sometimes it does work that would have required thousands of human hours for almost zero marginal cost. So the old idea, value comes primarily from human labor time, is starting to look shady. Who is creating value here? The human, the data, the model, the compute, the platform that controls all of them? Okay, second, competition. Let's look at competition. In a lot of digital markets, you don't have lots of small firms. I would say in most of markets today, you don't have lots of small firms. But in these digital markets, we have a few giant platforms that benefit from massive network effects. They own the data, they control the algorithms, and they can cross-subsidize products to kill competition. This produces the kind of winner-takes-all outcome that is absolutely the opposite of competition. Third point, let's look at information. The theory assumes that people are reasonably informed. Well, in platform capitalism, the platform knows everything about the user, and the user knows almost nothing about the platform. And well, regulators always get late to the party. So that's not a market with symmetric information. That's clearly a power imbalance. So here's the theoretical punchline. We're trying to navigate 5 massive transitions using economic models built for a world without AI, without platforms, and without this level of asymmetry. No wonder policymakers are confused. No wonder you often read funding calls that feel incoherent. The map doesn't match the territory. Fourth point, the new superpower for researchers, transition literacy. Let's talk about transition literacy. So what do we do with this? We need a new form of economic literacy, not just I know what GDP is, but I can read transitions. Transition literacy means you can look at a country or a sector and ask, where is it on green, digital, globalization, war, housing? Which transition is blocking the others? Where is the pressure coming from? Voters, markets, geopolitics, platforms, climate? Which of these transitions are funders obsessed with right now? Once you see that picture, 3 things happen. You stop chasing random calls. You start aligning your work with the biggest, most structural problems. Second, you stop writing generic innovation proposals and you start framing your idea as a solution to a specific transition bottleneck. And third, you stop treating AI and platforms as a side topic. You start integrating them into your analysis of power, value, and inequality. In practice, transition science helps you make money by increasing the possibility that your projects and proposals get funded. It helps you save money and time by not investing years in topics that sit outside the real pressure points. And it helps you feel smart because you finally see how all these big headlines actually fit together. Okay, fifth point, one simple mental model to keep. If everything I said so far felt like a lot, it is, keep this one simple mental model. Every serious decision now lives at the intersection of at least 2 of these transitions. Think about it. A hydrogen project, it's green, plus new globalization, plus war economy. A smart city housing project, it's housing, plus digital, plus green. Defense AI project, it's war plus digital. University internationalization strategy is new globalization plus digital plus housing for students and staff. So if your research, your proposal, your innovation project, your startup only touches 0 or 1 transition, it will feel small. It won't be good. If it clearly sits at the intersection of 2 or 3, with AI and platforms explicitly considered, it will feel strategic. That's the heart of transition science. So all of this sounds a bit abstract, right? Let's look at some concrete situations. You have 5 transitions, you have AI, platforms, scorecards. Let me make it real with a few stories. I'll give you 3 quick case studies. A country story, a project story, and a researcher story. As you listen, I want you to do one thing. Secretly compare your country, your institution, your topic to these stories. Okay? So, case study 1. Denmark versus Portugal versus the trap. What I call the trap. Let's start at the country level. Imagine you're looking at our transition scorecard. Each country has 5 bars: green, digital, new globalization, war economy, housing crisis. Now picture these profiles. There's a almost there country. You have Denmark. On the composite transition index, it's up in the 8.59 range out of 10. So that doesn't mean it's perfect. It does mean, however, it's strong in green policy. It has a solid digital infrastructure and skills. It is reasonably resilient in globalization, not asleep on security, and has a housing situation that, well, it's not ideal, but it's not on fire either. So the pattern is balanced. No single bar is catastrophically low of those 5. Now, why does this matter for you? Because when a country sits in that almost there zone, funders are willing to experiment. They want frontier projects. There is data, there's capacity to support more complex interventions, and international partners see it as a safe bet for pilots. So if you as a researcher or innovator are based in or working with that kind of country, you're sitting on a credibility bonus. You have a bonus there, clearly. You can pitch projects at the intersection of transitions, think green, digital or housing, or green and new globalization, and funders will believe you can actually implement them. Now let's look at another profile, the strong but fragile country. Let's talk about Portugal. In the AWTI profile, Portugal looks something like this. Relatively strong on green, decent progress on renewables and climate policy, middling on digital, not a disaster but not a top tier digital player, and weak on defense autonomy, on war transition. Strong dependence on broader alliances. And absolutely screaming on housing crisis. On the surface, this is not doom and gloom at all, but from a transition perspective, it screams opportunity and risk in the same picture. Opportunity because that green strength can be leveraged for green value chains. Digital gaps can attract EU support for skills and infrastructure. Defense and dual-use gaps open space for new industries if the strategy is right. But risk, because over-reliance on others for security is in this more dangerous world, that's dangerous. Risk because a digital gap in an economy where platforms and AI are steering value, that's a risk. If you're a country like this, your superpower is framing. We're strong here, weak here. This project is exactly the bridge between the two. That sentence, that line alone, when backed by data, is pure gold in a proposal. So let's look at the third profile, the stuck in the middle country. The country I'll just call the trap. On paper, it might have had decent growth in the 2000s. It may be integrated in global trade, maybe even picked up in a few innovation labels. But when you look at the transition scores, green is low, fossil heavy, vulnerable to climate shocks. Digital is patchy, good mobile penetration but weak deep skills. Globalization is high exposure, low resilience, lots of dependence, little redundancy. Security is underfunded and reactive. Housing is breaking, affordability collapsing in major cities. So this is the kind of developed trap in transition language. Enough integration to be exposed, not enough capacity to be safe. So why do I show you this? Because many researchers still choose topics as if they were in Denmark, studying fine-tuning, small optimizations, little incremental ideas, while their country or their market is actually in trap mode, where the real demand is for big structural fixes, changes. If you keep this mental picture of the three profiles, you start seeing where your work actually lands. Almost there, the strong but fragile and the trap, these three profiles. So that was the case study 1. Let's look at case study 2. Let's look at the hydrogen project that almost failed. Let's go down one level to a project. So a few years ago, I worked with a consortium that wanted to build a green hydrogen corridor connecting ports and industrial clusters. The first version of their proposal was very engineering driven. Lots of technical detail, lots of modeling, lots of equipment. It wasn't bad, but it was framed as a single transition project. Green. Full stop. It's a green transition project. Guess what? In these highly competitive calls, it wasn't enough. So when we reframed it through the transition lenses, we did 3 changes. 1, we mapped it across transitions. So we forced ourselves to answer, okay, green, obvious, decarbonization of industry and transport. Yeah, but what about digital? Where is the data layer? The smart grid, the predictive maintenance, the AI for efficiency. And 3, the new globalization. How does this change trade patterns, supply chain, energy security? 4, what economy? Does hydrogen infrastructure reduce dependence on hostile suppliers? And 5, housing crisis. What happens to jobs, to local communities, to industrial towns? So when we forced ourselves to answer all these questions, suddenly the project stopped being a green tech project and became a resilience project. It was no longer let's build hydrogen stuff. It became let's reposition this region in the new energy order using hydrogen as a lever across green, digital, security, industrial policy, everything. So we added, second place, we added the AI and the platform angle. So we explicitly integrated data and AI in the project. A platform to coordinate demand and supply between ports, factories, and energy producers. AI models to optimize when to store, when to move, when to convert. And data governance rules. Who owns the data? Who can access it? How to avoid lock-in by a single vendor. Now it started speaking the language of digital Europe, of AI-enabled industry, of sovereign platforms, not just hardware. So it was another step forward. And in third place, we aligned it with the transition gaps. We looked at the host countries' AWTI profiles, And let's say the countries were strong on green, but weak on digital and security. So we literally wrote in the proposal these words: this project uses an existing strength, green, to close two critical gaps, digital and security. So the result, well, much higher score in the revised proposal. But more important here, if your project only lives in one transition, you're probably leaving impact and money on the table. Okay, that was case study 2. Now case study 3. Last story is at the personal level. I want you to imagine a researcher, we can call her Anna, and a smart, hard-working, doing a PhD on digital entrepreneurship. And for years, her strategy was simple: follow the new buzzword. She touched on e-commerce adoption, social media marketing, gig economy, remote work. Every time, just as she was about to publish or submit a big proposal, the topic starts feeling already done. Does that sound familiar? One day she started looking at her work through the transitions lens. Instead of asking what's the next fashionable digital topic, she started asking which transition bottleneck am I really studying? She realized that all her work was basically about one thing: how small firms and workers survive inside platform capitalism in countries that are stuck in the middle of the transition. So she reframed her research, and her next big project proposal stopped being how platform-dominated digital markets are reshaping middle-class stability in mid-transition economies, and what policies can prevent a new development trap. Same person, same data, a different theory. But it connected AI and platform power to concrete social outcomes: jobs, housing, inequality. So it positioned her as someone working on systemic risk, not just on interesting cases. So these are the 3 case studies. Let's bring that back to you. What do these 3 stories have in common? In each case, the turning point was the same: moving from topic thinking to transition thinking. Instead of asking, is this an interesting area? Is this an interesting market? They started asking, which transition does this fix? Which gap does this close? Which risk does this reduce? Because that's where the money is. And that's where time is not wasted. That's where you stop feeling like you're chasing trends and start feeling like you're shaping them up. All right, so let's close this. You've got the theory, you heard the stories. Now I want you to do something with it. I'm going to give you some simple tasks you can start this week. And this will help you make better funding bets, avoid dead-end topics, save months of work, and feel smarter and calmer about where your research or your life is going. So, task number 1. It's very simple. Pick one country, one region you work in, maybe where you live, maybe where your main projects happen. On a piece of paper, draw 5 horizontal lines and label them green, digital, new globalization, war economy, housing crisis. Now, very roughly, give each of them a score from 0 to 10. In this scale, 0 to 3, it's a big problem. 4 to 6, it's mid-transition fragile. 7 to 10 is strong, relatively strong. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink this. Use your gut, your reading, the headlines you see every week. You can also get my data for AWTY. Just subscribe to the newsletter. You can see the notes, the podcast notes. Then ask yourself one question. Looking at these 5 scores, what is the biggest transition bottleneck in that region? Circle it. That's your first radar lock, where demand for research, demand for innovation, demand for new projects is stronger. Task number 2. Take one project you're already working on. It can be, I don't know, some proposal for Erasmus or Horizon, some national project, your PhD topic, your startup project, your business plan, a paper you're writing, anything. At the top of a page, write the project title, and then below that, create a little checklist with the 5 transitions: green, digital, new globalization, war economy, housing crisis, and now answer as straight and honestly as possible. Which of these transitions does my project really touch? Which ones are being ignored and might actually be relevant if you thought about it differently? Does this project currently look like a single transition story, or zero transition story, worse even? And how could it be a 2 or 3 transition story? If you realize, whoa, I'm only talking about digital, but there's clearly a green or a housing angle here, highlight that. That's free impact you can get with your already existing project. You haven't claimed it yet. It's also where you can strengthen the impact section of your proposal, or deepen the policy implications of a paper, or reframe a project report to look more strategic. Okay, that's task number 2. Now, task number 3 to end. Write a 5-sentence transition story for the same proposal, report, project, business plan, whatever you're working on. This is about communication, this task. Take that same project and write a 5-sentence transition story about it. Literally 5 sentences, no more, with this context. First, a context sentence. Country or region X is strong or weak or mid-transition or whatever on the green, digital, globalization, war or housing, whatever. Then a second sentence, a problem sentence. Because of this profile, it faces some risks, some bottleneck, especially in 1 or 2 of those transitions. Then a third sentence, project sentence. Our project tackles this by doing X at the intersection of transition A and transition B, with AI, with platforms playing some specific role, whatever. Fourth sentence, if we succeed, X will be better able to whatever, increase resilience, reduce dependence, create new capabilities, what is the case in these transitions. And final sentence, why now? Why now? This matters now because funders and policymakers are under pressure to deliver whatever goals, the green, digital, war economy, housing, whatever it is. And they are under pressure to deliver that quickly and visibly. Read it out loud. If it makes sense, you've got a 5-sentence block that can be gold. It can go straight into the excellence or impact sections of a proposal, or it can open the intro of a paper, or it can become the executive summary of a business plan, whatever it is. And it really makes you sound like someone who understands the bigger map, not just that narrow topic you're working on. So, quick recap to close the episode. Map your country, audit 1 project, write a 5-sentence transition story. If you do just that, you're already operating on a different level for most people, submitting proposals to the same call as you. So share your 5-sentence transition story with me on LinkedIn or email. Anyway, so this is it. Hope you enjoyed it. Check my book, Transition Science in the Economy, link in the notes. Hope to see you next time.
Credits, author and host Fernando C. Gaspar, music Hugo Gaspar, Lisbon, Portugal, 2024. Reach us by email or DM.